Good evening, everybody, and welcome to I think this is my 12th Zoom presentation. We're dedicating this one to Umbria's liquid gold, olive oil. If you look at the picture, the lower picture, the one on the bottom of the bruschetta with olive oil, you can see what I mean by liquid gold. That is a slice of bruschetta, on a plate that's just come back from the mill, and it's our olive oil. Excuse me, I'm just going to get a quick drink of water. Okay. And, okay. Ready, Julia? Julia's here to help me out. No fruit-bearing tree in the Mediterranean area has ever been praised, sung about, venerated, revered, symbolized in mythology as much as the olive tree. Since ancient times, it's been a symbol of peace, wisdom, prosperity, fertility, and victory. And it has accompanied the inhabitants of the Mediterranean world in times of prosperity, in times of deprivation, and it has defined the landscape. This is the medieval hill town of Trevi. You probably recognize Assisi. This is taken from the west. Vineyard and olive trees in the foreground. The beautiful Basilica of St. Francis up on the hill. That's the Franciscan monastery. Just a little aside, we're very excited. The head of the Franciscan monastery of Assisi, Padre Custode Gambetti, is one of the new cardinals. We're kiddingly saying to him, he might be the next pope. Now, olive oil has been very important in the culture and history of the Italians from ancient times, and it still is today. And olive oil is especially useful in a difficult and negative situation. It's used to take off the malocchio. And this is our rural neighbor, Peppa. She's doing the symbol for the malocchio. That's the corna. It's two fingers representing probably the horns of the bull. This could be an ancient symbol from ancient peoples. And to take off the malocchio, or the evil eye that someone may have put on you, you put 3 drops of olive oil on a plate where you've already put a little bit of water. Excuse me. Thank you. I'm just good. Pardon me. And you'll put 3 drops of olive oil on the plate where you have a little bit of water. And if the olive oil disperses and spreads out on the plate, someone's put the evil eye on you. This is Peppa with a friend of ours, a rural friend, Gigino, and she is doing the corna symbol, the horns, so that she can be sure that no one's put the evil eye on him. Just recently with Pino at Peppa's house, she wanted to make sure nobody put the evil eye on Pino. So she put 3 drops of water on the plate. She gave those 3 drops, of oil on a plate of water. She gave those 3 drops the corna symbol right away. And then observed the olive oil moving on the plate. And alas, if you look to the right, the olive oil did not remain the 3 drops, it dispersed. On the left, you can see her dropping the olive oil into the plate. She uses her 3rd finger 3 times, 3 times 3. And she might do this 3 times. 3 is the sacred number, of course. 3 is the Trinity. And she was disappointed to know that those olive oils dispersing on the plate meant that somebody had put the evil eye on Pino, the malocchio. Now, let me tell you, the malocchio is put on you, the evil eye, not deliberately by anybody. It's put on you because of invidia or envy. I remember when our little daughter Julia cried and cried and cried for 2 or 3 years, she cried. And I was telling Peppa this one time, and she said, well, didn't you know? You should have gone to a witch and had the evil eye taken off you. And I said, why was the evil eye put on me? And she said, it's invidia. She said, it's envy. And she explained to me, someone probably thought you had a beautiful little girl and they wanted a beautiful little girl too. And that did it. And she said, my little boy Leonello, the first, he cried and cried too. And I said, what did you do? She said, I got my money together and I went to the local witch. And she took the evil eye off. I said, how much did it cost you? She said, oh, 2,000 lira. That would have been $1.50, but for a farm woman, that would have been a lot of money. So what she did for Pino is she put her fingers in olive oil and she blessed him 3 times. You can see her on the left, she's blessing him. Then she does the corna symbol again, and she was sure that the evil eye was taken off Pino. So I wanted to start with this about malocchio, hoping that no one is putting the evil eye on me, wishing me good luck on this talk, because that's exactly what can do the trick of the evil eye. Then after she took the evil eye off, she put 3 drops of oil on the plate, and they remained on the plate without dispersing. So the malocchio was taken off Pino. Olive oil has been important in ancient ancient colors for centuries, of course, in Italian culture. It was very important in the city of Pompeii as well, in all the Roman colonies, in all of the Greek colonies of Italy, which went Magna Grecia. All of southern Italy was part of Greece as of the 5th century BC. We can see in this image a glass bottle with olive oil in it. That would be called an oliviera, and it is from the city of Pompeii. It's corked. It's one of the prized objects in the National Archaeological Museum of Naples. Olive oil from Pompeii with a cake or a slice of bread, which was scorched, of course, in the fire, burnt in the fire. On the right here, we see an olive oil container, Roman, from the 4th or 5th century AD. This would be called an amphora, used to ship olive oil around the Mediterranean. Some scholars have argued that olive cultivation originated with the ancient Egyptians and that the oldest testament of olive oil cultivation was found in Palestine some years ago. A couple of olive pits and charred wood dating from 3500 BC, because at that time, the olives would have been used above all for fuel. Other scientists indicate that the olive tree was most likely first cultivated in Mesopotamia and Persia, spreading to Syria and Israel on the Turkey-Syrian border, and then was diffused by the Phoenicians on their trade routes throughout the Mediterranean area, Jordan, Lebanon, Greece, Italy, Europe, Southern Europe, France, and Spain as well. It's long been an ingredient, as mentioned, in Roman cuisine, but before it was used for cuisine, it was used above all for perfumes for athletes, and was shipped around the Mediterranean in amphoras. One on the left is used for shipment of olive oil. That's Roman, a little bit earlier than the Roman period. Let's call it the classical period, as after the 1st century AD. This is pre-classical period. On the right is another amphora that's used for the storing of olive oil in one's home, also Roman. Olive oil was sold in Pompeii. There you can see a sign for it on the wall of Pompeii. And here you can see a symbol of olive oil. On the right, the olive branches, and on the left, some olive oil containers. That was probably the entrance to a thermopolia or thermopolium, basically a place to eat in Pompeii. There were about 55 thermopolia that served food, wine, and olive oil was used in all of these places, of course, in food preparation. This is a fresco of Pompeii, of a villa, and you can see it must have been a wealthy home, because the olives up there on the left are in a beautiful silver cup, next to some pea pods and maybe some quails plucked and ready for cooking. Here we have a marble relief of a wine press of the 1st to 2nd century after Christ. This is in the Archaeological Museum of Aquileia, which is in northern Italy. And the olive press, like this, a vertical olive press, was first designed, taught how to use to the people by Plinio the Elder. Pliny, you would probably call him. He lived in the 1st century AD, and he was the historian who gave an eyewitness account of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, 79 AD. The Romans cultivated olive trees in all of their territories, including North Africa, in the ancient city of Volubilis in Morocco. And here you can see the ruins. In the city of Volubilis, Roman Volubilis, there were villas possessing olive presses. At least 55 villas had their own olive presses. And here you can see a picture of ancient olive presses of Volubilis, Morocco. It reached maximum splendor in the 2nd to 3rd century AD. And the fact that 55 homes had their own olive presses indicated that about 25% of the homes of Volubilis did. Not only did they have olive oil, because of pressing it and the ability to ship it around the Mediterranean, they also made a fortune in the selling of wild animals, lions, panthers, and even elephants for the gladiatorial games in Rome. Here you see an image of what Volubilis probably looked like in the 2nd to 3rd century AD. And the beautiful mosaics of a villa of Volubilis tell us about the wealth of this extraordinary Roman city. Look at the central motif of this mosaic, the olive tree. But around it, many of the wild animals which they raised and then sold for the gladiatorial games. This is another example of a beautiful floor mosaic of a villa of Volubilis. The olive is starring here too. Notice the olive wreath crown on the person in the foreground in the lower right. Here we have an olive press of another Roman colony in present-day Tunis. The press probably, you can see it here in the foreground on the left, probably dates from the 1st to 2nd century AD. And here we have an image of an ancient olive press in Bodrum, Turkey. This is very, very, very ancient. This could be 5th to 6th century BC. Very ancient, we can tell, because it is the type of press when what was used was a stone basin, on top of it a flat stone heavy rock, crushing the olives, and then out that aperture on the left, the olive oil would flow into the amphora or the big jar below. Years ago, but not too long ago, I think maybe it's 20 years ago now, they found an extraordinary jarra, which means jar, huge jar in terracotta for containing olive oil of 2000 BC. And this is the oldest archaeological discovery in Italy linked to olive oil. Traces of olive oil, that is oleic acid, were found in this jarra, which is either of earthenware. This is earthenware. Jarras can be earthenware or ceramics. And again, dating to 2000 BC, this was found in Castelluccio di Noto, which is on the eastern coast of Sicily. This would have been part, of course, of Magna Grecia. And this is the necropolis of Castelluccio di Noto, where that enormous jarra with oleic acid in it was found. Here we have a map of Magna Grecia, the area of southern Italy, which was colonized by the Greeks. From about 5000 BC to the 2nd century AD, this was all Greek. You're looking at the dark brown. And I like this map because it gives you an indication of what the Greek names were for these cities of Magna Grecia. The most northern point, as you can see, was Neapolis, Naples. So Magna Grecia was a bit of Puglia. Basilicata is the instep of the boot, the toe of the boot, Calabria, Sicily, and a little bit of Campania, that area up there where the city of Naples is. Another extraordinary archaeological discovery was made, I think in 2004, roughly, not too long ago, by a team working in Burgundy, France. This is the team. And they found traces of olive oil. Excuse me, let's go back here. Traces of olive oil and vases containing olive oil dating to 500 BC. And this was a time when the Celts were living in this area of Burgundy. And this olive oil of 500 BC in great jarre or jars or earthenware containers of the Celts were used for embalming rather than for cuisine, because this was the time when olive oil was used principally for embalming, athletic games, perfumes, cosmetics, rather than cuisine. The archaeologists are not sure from whom the Celts purchased that olive oil. Italy, Greece, or southern France. On this pelike, which is a Greek vase with a flat bottom used for the containing of olive oil, you can see an image of a sail of olive oil. And this is from the Archaeological Museum of Florence. On the amphora on the right, which does not have such a wide base as the pelike does, we have an image of the 6th century before Christ of picking of olives. And this is an Etruscan vase. This is from Vulci, which was an Etruscan city in the area of present-day Latium, which would be the the western coast of Italy, just north of Rome. This is now in the British Museum. Aribalos were small jars with a rounded form used for holding olive oils for embalming, mixed with essences of flowers for perfumes, and used by athletes to rub on their bodies before and after competitions. These aribalos are Etruscan. They're of the 7th century BC. I think many of you heard my last talk on the mystique of wine, and we talked extensively about the objects in the extraordinary Museo del Vino in Torgiano, the wine museum. The Lungarotti family also has another extraordinary small museum called the Museo dell'Olio. And these two artifacts are in the oil museum of Torgiano. That's for your next trip to Italy. We've talked about doing a guided tour of Torgiano with the two now museums that we know about, the wine museum and the olive oil museum, and then de Ruta to see the making of the beautiful maiolica. The athletes in the Roman times, in the Greek times, cleansed their bodies with mixtures of olive oil and powders. Soap enters into the culture of Italy much later. It's brought by the barbarians. It's made of pig fat. The Romans cleaned their bodies with mixtures of olive oils and different powders, as mentioned. And after cleaning their bodies, and especially after gladiatorial competitions, they would be doing this, they scraped that mixture off their bodies with these objects called strigille. The lower one is Etruscan. It is from the 4th to 3rd century BC. It is from Tuscania, another Etruscan city of Latium, that region of Italy where Rome is located. The bronze strigille above is from Magna Graecia, and excuse me for the error in the label, that is 4th to 5th century BC, not 44th century, mamma mia. And that is in the Museo dell'Olio in Torgiano. Strigillato is the design in relief on a marble object, especially the sarcophagus, which looks like a strigille. Look at those beautiful curved lines. So we have an altar here over a Roman sarcophagus, which is a strigillato relief decoration on the front in Gubbio, here in Umbria. If you look at the one below, that is another strigillato relief on another Roman sarcophagus, also in Gubbio, 2nd century AD. The olive oil was also kept in containers called lekithos. This is a Greek word, also used by the Etruscans, these lekithos. The ones you're seeing here are actually Greek. Narrow neck, and an aperture which is quite small. It's just for the pouring out of the olive oil. Look at the extraordinary decorations on olive oil bottles. Isn't it amazing? The first one, if you look at it, you can see an athlete, and what is he holding in his hand? A strigile. And that is from the 3rd or 4th century BC, and it is one of the gems of the Museo dell'Olio in Torgiano. Olive oil was also used for anointing of animals, anointing of persons, anointing of the dead. This is an ancient bronze sculpture of a high priest anointing a bull. It is in a museum in Bern, Switzerland. Olive oil was used as a tribute to the deities. And this, I don't remember seeing it, but I must have seen it because we were in Persepolis in Iran. And this is an olive oil as a tribute to the deities, a relief in Persepolis, Iran. It dates to the early 5th century BC. And you can see the high priests are taking to a deity olive oil containers, peliques, and small bowls for the presentation to the gods of oil. This is another offering to a gods, a libation offered to a goddess. And this actually extraordinary sculpture, it's a relief. It's in the Louvre Museum. It dates to 2500 BC. You can see the offering being held, and it is being presented in the peliques like the ones we saw before. We talk about olive oil, the importance of anointing with olive oil in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. This is the anointing of David depicted by the painter from Verona, Paolo Veronese, and this dates from the 16th century. You can see the young David in white on his knees with his arms crossed in a gesture of humility, and Samuel will be anointing him with the oil. The anointing of oil is part of Christian culture as well. Young persons are anointed on their foreheads with the oil at the time of confirmation, the holy oil called the chrisma. And what is the last rite? It's called the last unction. Unction means oil. Ungere comes from the Latin to anoint with oil. Oil was also used in the making of perfumes, and this is a delightful fresco in the Casa dei Veti in Pompeii from the 1st century AD. These are the amorini, the little perfumers, the little amorini, means really the little loved ones. These are cherubs making the perfumes. And I want to show you in detail how extraordinary is this wonderful fresco. Look at the perspective here. And you can see on the right, a little amorino has the amphora. Remember last week, those of you who were at my lecture on wine, we saw how these amphorae were pointed in the bottom to be stored in the hulls of ships for shipping around the Mediterranean. He's holding the amphorae, he's putting it into a little cup for another amorino kneeling down. Look at the two on the left, the little winged cherubs behind them are amphorae grouped together. Beautiful perspective in this grouping of the amphorae there. Unguentario was another object used by the Romans for the containing of oils, and especially perfumed oils. And these are Roman glass bottles. These date from about the 1st to the 2nd century AD. And here is another collection of Roman unguentaria in the plural. And the ones in the foreground could be balsamati because they have a more rotund shape, if you will. They're a little bit more globular looking. The ones with the long necks would be definitely unguentaria. And we see a beautiful unguentario here on the left. It is from the 4th century AD. And it is now in the Archaeological Museum in Marseille in southern France. Look at that exquisite design, blown glass. On the right, we can see in this fresco from the Villa Farnese in Rome, this is 1st to 3rd century AD, this fresco, a young girl applying perfume. In the wonderful Museo dell'Olio in Torgiano, there are two beautifully presented objects, beautifully decorated, beautifully presented also in the museum. One is a Phoenician Alabastron. It is a container for perfume, and the name Alabastron literally comes from the word alabaster, because the Phoenicians often made them from alabaster, carved alabaster. This is actually glass. This is for the containing of perfumes, olive oil also, and also perfumes made with olive oil and floral essences, or simply oil for the rubbing on the body. This is 5th century BC. And on the right, we have a Phoenician amphoriscos, just meaning a small amphora, and this dates from the 5th to the 4th century BC. Both of these in the Museo dell'Olio in Torgiano, and I would like to thank them right now for the use of some of these photos as well. Some of the Roman balsamati, which are jars for holding balsamos, oil mixtures, are absolutely beautiful, and they're almost contemporary in their designs, aren't they? Like these 4 right here. And look at these 2. These probably date from the 2nd to 4th century AD, Roman. How contemporary are these? These are in the Museo dell'Olio of Torgiano. The ones on the left and right are glass. They're Roman, probably 2nd to 4th century AD. The one in the middle is older, and it is Greek. They're all balsamati. These are 2 extraordinary pieces. The one on the left is in the shape of shells, and this is from southern Italy. I believe this is Magna Grecia, and this is about, I think, about 3rd century BC. The one on the right, I put this picture in deliberately to show you, there's a little chain at the top, because the athletes, when they're heading to the competition, they're carrying their oil with them. Sometimes it's dangling from their wrist, off of a chain, or coming around their neck off of a chain. These are swan-shaped balsamati from 700 to 550 BC. So these will be Etruscan, and they're from Popolonia. Popolonia is on the Tuscan coast, just south of Livorno. And these balsamati are from Grosseto, which is, Grosseto is also the Tuscan coast. And I wanted to show you these because not only are they swan-shaped, but there's one shaped like a deer. The balsamati could be in the shape of various animals. They're extremely fanciful, these extraordinary containers of oils and perfumes. This is the necropolis, the Etruscan necropolis of Popolonia, where the swan-shaped Ascos were found. This is a beautiful Etruscan balsamario in the shape of a deer. And they can also be fanciful and fun, like these monkey ascos. You can call them balsamario, you can also call them ascos. This is more a Greek word for a container of oils. Look at the monkey on the left. He's holding the container where the oil will go. On the right is an ascos of a monkey on horseback. This is an ascos of a wild boar, cinghiale, from the 4th century BC, found in Latium, that region where Rome is. Many balsamati are in the form of birds. This is a stunning balsamario, and this is in the British Museum. I believe it was found in Volci. It should be about 4th to 5th century BC. Isn't that exquisite, Etruscan? And it's reproduced on a stamp. For the Republic of San Marino, their 50-cent stamp is the balsamario, now in the British Museum, or the ascos, as you may wish to call it. These are Etruscan ascos from Volterra, which is an amazing archaeological museum of Etruscan art. Don't miss it when you're next in Italy, Volterra for the Etruscans. And if you'd like to see an Ascos before coming to Italy, pop into the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and you can see this one of the 4th century BC from Chiusi, another archaeological site of the Etruscan times with an extraordinary Etruscan museum in Tuscany. Balsamati were also in the form of the columba, the dove. These are called Colombine. They were made by the Romans. They're dating from about the 2nd to 4th century AD. Beautiful glass, very fine bottles. The olive oil was put in and the bottles were sealed. They were sealed with hot wax. And the only way to open them was to break either the tail or the beak, and then the perfume or the oil would come out. Two stunning Etruscan Ascos are on view if you're ever in the beautiful Etruscan Museum of Tarquinia, an important Etruscan site in Latium. These date from the 4th century BC. I look at them and I wonder if they could be portraits of the persons buried in that tomb where they were found. Because when the Etruscans buried, let us remember, we talked about it in my last lecture on wine, the tomb was prepared as if it were going to be the lodging for the next life, with beautiful frescoes, with foods, with perfumes, with ascos of olive oil, so that they would have moisture and cosmetics and perfumes for their bodies for the next life. So I'm really wondering if these two beautiful ascos could be the portraits of those buried in the tomb. This was found in Bulgaria. This is an extraordinary ascos of a boxer, a pugile, a pugilista called in Italian, bronze. Look at that broken nose. This was the ascos in which he kept the oils for the oiling of his body before and after his boxing bouts. Now, here you can see the front, and here you can see the back of this extraordinary ascos found in Bulgaria, bronze. This is a stunning piece of a bust of a woman found in Popolonia, Tuscany. We saw above the Necropolis of Tuscany, an Etruscan site on the western coast of Italy. This beautiful woman, and look at those eyes and how finely done is her makeup. This bust dates from 700 to 550 BC, a bust containing the oil that she would use. This ascos, I had to mention, this is an extraordinary find, which was in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles for years. It has returned to Italy. I think it returned in 2008. This ascos in the shape of a mermaid, bronze, was sold to a Swiss collector in 1988 by tombaroli, means tomb robbers, who had found it in a tomb of Crotone. They purchased it from the person who owned the land where the ascos was found for about $5,000 and a cow. It's worth far more than that. They then sold it to this collector in Switzerland, who sold it to the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, but its provenance has been proven as from Crotone, Magna Grecia, Calabria, dating from the 5th century BC, and it is now home in the Museum of Crotone. Side view and front of view. And boy, when I found out about this, I decided that as soon as we're out and able to go and on the road again and away from lockdown, there's so much I want to see in Calabria, and this has made the decision even more firm to go. Isn't that something? So this mermaid has returned home. Mermaids were often depicted on ascoses. And here is one here. Her little face, excuse me, is out of the picture here. But this is a mermaid, an Etruscan Ascos, probably actually pre-Etruscan. Excuse me, I shouldn't even say Etruscan. It was Magna Grecia as well. This is southern Italy. And look at the hole where her head is. And that is so a loop could be put through it, and it could be worn around the neck or the wrist for the carrying of the oil, probably before an athletic competition. Oil was often used in lamps as well. One of the prime uses of olive oil was in lamps. These are Roman and italic lamps, meaning in the area of Italy, which wasn't particularly Rome, and italic would also include Umbria, because here we're staying a native italic people called the Umbri. Umbria, comes from umbro, comes from the Greek word umbrikos, meaning native indigenous people. So some of these lamps could have been found in Umbria. They were Roman and italic lamps from the 3rd century BC to the 2nd century AD, and they are in the Museo dell'Olio in Torgiano, not far from Perugia. A place to see on your next trip to Italy for the 2 extraordinary museums, the Museo dell'Olio, the Museo del Vino. These are 2 other Etruscan lamps, and we call these double-footed lamps. They call them either lampade o lucerne, and they often had faces from mythology or deities, emperors in the lamps as well. There could even be lamps which were erotic. I wonder if these were bedroom lamps. You want to notice the 2 here, which flank the 3 hanging on the wall. The 3 hanging on the wall are also bearing clearly erotic scenes. These are Roman, probably 1st to 2nd century AD. Not long ago in Modena, and I think not long ago, I should say maybe about 10 years ago, doing road work, they uncovered what seemed to be a pre-Roman or maybe even early Roman period, 1st to 2nd century AD dump, where they dumped their broken pottery. And what did they find but a mass of Roman lamps? And they were all lamps of the type that are called firmalampen. And here you can see photos of them. Firmalampen were mass-produced Roman lamps, and they were produced by 4 or 5 main families. The ones on the left have the names on the back of the families that produced these. The one on the right, you can see faces of mythology and so forth would be on the top of the lamp. So these are mass-produced Roman lamps, 1st to 3rd century AD. This is an extraordinary oil lamp in glass. This is called the diatratum cup, which means a cup with an outer grid as well as an inner grid, the outer part attached to the inner part with little stems. This is the oil lamp of a very wealthy villa, Roman 4th century after Christ. Medieval oil lamps could be in terracotta, as the Roman ones were. This one on the left is terracotta, or in bronze. And in the medieval lamps that were bronze, attention is given to the handles more than to just the base. These are all in the Museo dell'Olio in Torgiano. In the medieval period too, and just a little bit later the medieval period, we're kind of almost into the Renaissance, the Taquino Santitatis circulates in Europe. And the Taquino Santitatis was the translation of an 11th century medieval treatise of Baghdad. And it was this medical treatise of Baghdad gave the people all the knowledge they needed for the care of their health, what to eat, what products the land should give, how to grow them, how to cultivate them, how to preserve them. And here you see 3 pages from the Taquino Santitatis, which I believe is in the Bibliothèque of Paris now, the original copy. And these 3 pages talk about the olive production and olive gathering. This is the book itself, the Taquino Santitatis, Taquinum Santitatis, early 15th century. Bronze was used for oil lamps, as mentioned, and this is an oil lamp in the form of a dolphin, and is from Padua. The Paduan sculptors were great users of bronze. They were very, very influenced by the work of the Tuscan Donatello. And the bronze work in Padua is especially known throughout the peninsula in the 16th, 17th century. In the Museo dell'Olio of Torgiano, there are exquisite lamps, which are later than that period. The one on the left is 18th century. It's in silver bronze with a marble base. The one in the middle is bronze and silver and marble. And the one on the right is the Florentine oil lamp in Murano glass, Venice. Lovely in the photos, but really to see them face to face, if you will, or face to lamp is quite an experience. They're absolutely stunning, stunning pieces. In the Museo dell'Olio, there's also oil lamps of terracotta. These are fanciful figures. They're from Caltagirone, and which is on the island of Sicily, 19th to 20th century. And they were oil lamps for travelers, keeping them entertained with just the humor of the faces. Oil lamp burns in front of the tomb of St. Francis in Assisi. This is the tomb. You can see a Franciscan here on the right. His tomb is right over the altar, and hanging in front of his tomb is an oil lamp. Every year, one of the 20 regions of Italy will bring the oil that burns in front of his tomb. I wanted to put this as an example of olive oil as a tribute to the gods, to the deities. Oil lamps were buried with the Etruscans as an ex voto. That is a thanks for a favor received. That is a votive offering for the gods so that they would have swift passage in the next life. And the olive oil in a lamp is a sign of a tribute, as in the tomb of St. Francis in Assisi. This is actually Pope Francis kneeling in front of his tomb on his visit to Assisi. I think it was in 2014. And he's kneeling before the tomb, before the oil lamp for the Feast of St. Francis. And right next to him, on his left, is Padre Custodi Gambetti, who we're proud to say was just appointed cardinal by Pope Francis himself. And this is this year. You can see on the right, mast is the Prime Minister of Italy, Giuseppe Conte. And this is the oil. Look at the oil on the lamp, the olive oil being poured into the lamp that will burn in front of the tomb of Francis all year. This year, the people couldn't be present. Just a few people were there. I saw the event on television. It was impossible to be present due to the COVID situation. And every year, one of 20 regions of Italy will bring the oil that burns in front of his tomb. This year it was the Marches region. This is the mayor of one of the cities of the Marches, and she's lighting the lamp. The olive is the symbol of peace. It, of course, is right in front of the Basilica of St. Francis. And for his feast day, blessed olive branches which were blessed at his tomb, are given out by the Franciscans. I took this photo a few years ago at the time of the Feast of St. Francis. In the background, you can see the city of Assisi. There's a woman happily receiving her blessed olive branch from one of the friars. The olive branches were laid before Christ as he entered Jerusalem, and this is depicted in the fresco by Pietro Lorenzetti in the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi, Tuscan fresco painter. He painted this probably between 1310 and 1319. Look at that glorious city of Jerusalem. It's really his depiction of his own Siena, as it probably looked in the early 14th century, because painters could only paint what they knew. He wouldn't know what Jerusalem looked like. Behind some of the people, you could see a palm tree. Palms, too, were laid down. Palms, a symbol of glory. Palms, also the symbol of victory. So the palms were laid down, and also olive branches. You can see young boys on the left climbing up the olive trees to strip down branches to lay before Christ. So on Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Passover, in churches in Italy, we're given olive branches, not palm branches. The same scene is depicted by Giotto in his marvelous fresco in the Scrovegni Chapel of Padua, and he's depicting this a few years before Lorenzetti. This dates from about 1305, and of course it is going to be the great Giotto who first introduces to the world the sense of three-dimensional perspective, the sense of emotion in human behavior and so forth. And he, of course, will even influence Lorenzetti, who paints just a few years after him, maybe 5 or 10 years after him. So here he is entering Jerusalem, boys climbing the olive trees to strip down to lay before Christ. Prayer in the Olive Grove is a 5th to 6th century mosaic of Santa Apollinare Nuovo in that extraordinary town on the eastern coast of Italy, Ravenna, famous for its mosaics. And here you can see all the apostles are praying in the olive grove as the Lord blesses them. The olive branch, the symbol of peace, brought back to Noah to show him that peace was made with humanity and the Lord. The waters were receding. The flood was over. And this depiction is a 12th century mosaic in the extraordinary mosaic cycle of that cathedral of Monreale outside of Palermo in Sicily. 12th century mosaic, Noah and the olive tree. The olive branch and the dove. The dove with the olive branch is depicted many times in the catacombs. On the left, you can see a dove incised into the rock with an olive branch. And this is the Domitilla catacomb of the 3rd century after Christ, Rome. On the right, Noah welcomes the dove with the olive branch. And this is in the catacombs of Saints Pietro and Marcellino, 2nd to 3rd century after Christ, also in Rome. Here is another depiction of olive branches surrounding the central figure in the same catacombs, Pietro and Marcellino. Olive branches crown the heads of these horses in a chariot race. This seems to be the winning chariot. He's drawing close to the finish line. Waiting for him is the person who will trumpet the victory. The palm branch is there ready for the winner. The olive branches surmount the heads of the horses, probably to show us this is a race of peace. But olive branch too, let us remember, is a sign of victory. So this could be an omen that may this chariot be the victorious one, and so it was. Here, the same the mosaic cycle, olive branches on the heads of these horses. These are all in this one too. Let's go back a second. This is in the exquisite 4th century AD, Villa del Casale in Piazza Armerina in Sicily. Hundreds of square meters of extraordinary Roman mosaics, prancing horses with the olive branches on their head, sign of peace, sign of victory. And here you can see a figure in a chariot holding an olive branch. And this is a Roman silver orciolo, pure silver. An orciolo is a small jug. And it is in Bosco Reale, Campania. Bosco Reale, too, was covered by the eruption of Vesuvius, 79 AD. So this dates from the time of Pompeii, 1st century AD. This, too, is from Bosco Reale, an exquisite cup, obviously of a wealthy family, with the olive branch and olive motif. Olives, of course, decorate the tombs of the Etruscans. And this is the tomb of the leopards, 5th century BC, Tarquinia, which is in Latium. And I put this same photo in my talk last week because they're dancing. The gentleman on the left is holding a calyx, a beautiful cup of bucero, black clay, Etruscan work. He dances as his friend on the right or someone else on the right plays the pipes, and olive branches surround them. And let us remember again, this tomb will be the home of the deceased forever, and the decoration must be joyous. And what could be more joyous to them than the olive branches? For in ceremonies in the Etruscan religion, high priestesses carried olive branches in procession. So the olive branch is an omen of joy and prosperity for the Etruscans and good passage into the next life for the deceased in the tombs. Olives crown athletes. And here we see these are the sides of Etruscan vases, and they will date from maybe 300 years before Christ, Etruscan or Greek possibly. And you can see the athletes are being crowned with the olive branch, the sign of victory. This is a golden wreath of olives, and this was found in a Greek tomb And this dates from, I think, about the 4th century before Christ. Here is olive wreaths decorating on the gentleman on the right on his head. And this is from, this is the time of the eruption of Pompeii. This is a villa, most likely of Herculaneum. This will be from about the 1st century AD. Here we see a woman with an olive branch crown, and this is a fresco on the wall of a villa of Herculaneum, the 1st century AD. Another woman on the right is from another fresco of the time of Pompeii. She too is wearing a crown of olive branches. Why the olive branch? Why is it so important to the Greeks, to the Romans? It's associated with Athena, known as Minerva to the Romans. On the left, we have a relief of Athena. This is of the 5th century before Christ. It is in the Archaeological Museum in Athens. On the right, we have a 2nd century Roman image of Athena, and it's probably a copy of a Greek original. It's now in the Louvre Museum. Athena engaged with Poseidon in a contest. The contest had been decided by Zeus. Zeus declared that he who won the contest, he or she, the deity that would win the contest, would be given the possibility of being the official image or deity protecting Attica, the city of Athens. And they were to compete to decide who would be the most appropriate to be the protectress or protector of Athens. So in this competition, Poseidon takes his trident, he shoves it into the ground, water sprouts out. Athena goes to the water which gushes out, and she plants an olive tree. The court of the gods and goddesses ruled that Athena had the better right to be the protectress of Attica because she had given a better gift. The olive was useful for light, for heat, for food, for medicine, and perfume. It was useful for the libations which were offered to the gods. So she was given the city of Attica, Athens. She planted the original olive tree on a rocky hill that we now know today as the Acropolis. The olive tree that grows there today is said to have been an olive tree coming out of the roots of the original tree planted by Athena. This is a copy of the frieze that was on the front of the Parthenon, the temple dedicated to Athena, and it depicts Poseidon on the right with his trident, Athena on the left, and sprouting out of the water is the olive tree. The Parthenon is her temple. It's mid-5th century before Christ. It's dedicated to her. It's dedicated to Athena Parthenos, which means Athena the Virgin. She was one of the few goddesses who was always a virgin. And interesting, because in the Middle Ages, she was despised by the church. Although in the Middle Ages, at times, the Virgin took on aspects of tributes of Athena. There's a classic story of an attack on Constantinople in the Middle Ages. And it said that the Virgin appeared in a vision with a helmet on and a shield, advising the people to fight and defend themselves. So it's interesting, in the Middle Ages, there's this overlap of the Blessed Virgin and Athena. This is Athena with her olive tree near her as the lute player. And this is a vase on the side of a vase of the 4th century BC, a vase of Magna Grecia, southern Italy, that is, Taranto, Calabria. On the right, you can see Athena, or called by the Romans Minerva, on a Roman gilded silver bowl of the 1st century AD. And if you look to the left of her hand, you can barely see it on that silver bowl. There's a little owl, which is also associated with Athena because of her wisdom. She is the patroness of wisdom, of crafts, of strategy, but strategy and warfare taken with intelligence and with humanity. There's the owl of Athena on a skyphos, which is a bowl for drinking of beverages, Greek, 5th to 6th century BC, and an owl aribalos, which is a container for perfumes for oils or perfumes made with oils of the 7th century BC, which is in the museum in Munich. Athena's owl appears on coins, as does Athena herself. These are some Roman coins with images of owls on the left and Athena on the right. The olive is associated with the Blessed Virgin also, and this is a fresco which is in Perugia. It's not a fresco, it's an oil painting. It is by the school of Ugolino di Pietro, he's called, and this dates from the 14th century AD. So the Virgin too associated with olive tree, and here she is in the gesture of blessing. This is a stunning painting, 15th century by Botticelli. This is Athens, Athena, that is, with a centaur. She's pulling her hair, trying to get him to behave himself. The centaur is part man, part beast. And this could represent Athena overcoming the beastly aspects of humanity and man. So beautiful is that painting by Botticelli, which is in the Uffizi, this painting, that I'd like to show you a bit of the detail. Isn't she exquisite? Olives crown her, olives decorating her garment. This is Athena or Minerva, called by the Romans. This is in the Vatican Museum. It's a floor mosaic from an area near Rome, and this dates from the 3rd century after Christ. And Athena as Minerva, we have the Minerva Temple, which is the center of Assisi, dating from 100 BC. You can see in this photo, it's flanked by the bell tower on the left, 13th, 14th century. And next to the bell tower is the palace of the captains of the people, 14th century. She's also associated with Hercules because she aided him in some of his trials. And here we have an image of the Farnese Hercules, as it's called. This is of the 3rd century AD. The sponsors of this was the Farnese family. And he's leaning on his club, and his club was carved out of an olive tree. So Hercules, too, is strongly associated with the olive tree. On the right, we have a bronze statue of Hercules, 4th to 3rd century BC. It is now in the Louvre, and it was found in Foligno here in Umbria, not far from Assisi. And the one on the left is a copy actually of the original bronze one on the right, which is now in France. Hercules is depicted here with his club carved from an olive tree in one of the catacombs. This is from the 4th century AD. The catacomb is in Grotta Ferrata, not far from Rome. On the right, he's depicted in marble by Baccio Bandinelli. This is early 16th century in Florence. He's holding his club, again carved out of an olive tree. This is in Piazza della Signoria, right in front of Palazzo della Signoria in the center of Florence. Here we see Hercules depicted on a hydria, which is a Greek drinking vessel, and we can see him seated with his olive wood club. He is the seated figure, and there's an olive tree actually in front of him. In the calyx on the right, Hercules is seated and with his olive wood club, and the goddess Athena is there with an amphora of olive oil, maybe pouring to him as a tribute. This is the temple of Ercole Olivario, the 2nd century BC. It's in Rome. Some of you may look at it and say, isn't that the temple to Vesta? Well, when I studied in Rome, junior abroad, 68, 69, we were told that this was the temple of Vesta. Archaeologists since then have done research and it is now renamed the Temple of Ercolo Olivario. And why? Because it was erected under the sponsorship of a rich Roman merchant, Ottavio Reno. He traded in olive oil, he sold olive oil, used his wealth for the construction of this temple, and Hercules was the patron of oil merchants for the Romans. So this is now the Temple of Ercolo Olivario, Hercules, the olive man, if you will. And I'd like to close with this image of the beautiful golden olive branch, which was left on the moon by Neil Armstrong in 1969, a sign of peace. May it be that for all of us. And thank you very much for being with me tonight. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And I'd like to also thank those of you who've already made donations. And I would appreciate also making a thought about making a donation if you haven't already. I'm enjoying my work. This will be my work for some time to come. Due to global travel restrictions, I'm unable to share Umbria as a guide here. So I'm trying to share it as best I can virtually with all of you. And next week, we'll pick olives together and enjoy the fruit of our olive trees.